Game week 34 has come to a close with goals galore across the league, from 6-0 thrashings to exhilarating comebacks, and today we're going to go all over the action in the Premier League. Starting off with the first game, which was Crystal Palace versus West Ham. Souček gave West Ham the lead pretty quickly, but the lead didn't last long. It was the Czech Republic international who let his goal go to waste with a really poor mistake. A really disappointing way to concede, and obviously frustrating for West Ham, who have actually been playing much better in recent weeks. Palace were then cruising but conceded some silly goals from set pieces. However, the game did end 4-3, which means their good record continues under Roy Hodgson, and it's a positive bounce back after the Wolves defeat the previous week. West Ham have been playing well but have lost both of their last two games, so they'll need to get back on track if they do want to survive the drop. West Ham's final games are City, United, Brentford, Leeds and Leicester, which I think those first three games, I don't really see them getting much from any of that. Leeds and Leicester are going to be some massive games. Leicester away on the last day of the season is going to be a huge fixture. As for Palace, they've got Spurs, Bournemouth, Fulham and Forest coming up. I can see them getting a lot of points from all those games. I think Spurs are beatable at the minute. Bournemouth will be tricky, but Palace are at home. Fulham, they could get something from that. Forest will be a difficult game, obviously, because they'll be fighting for their place. But West Ham have got a really difficult run in, so they did need the win, but unfortunately they couldn't get it. One big talking point was obviously Zaha's reaction to getting subbed off. In my opinion, totally unnecessary. He scored a goal, his team were ahead. Just support your teammates. At the end of the day, we know he doesn't want to stay at Palace. He's obviously trying to force that move in the summer as his contract is expiring, but it's so obviously put on for the cameras. Your team are ahead. You've scored, you've put in your contribution. He's just come back from injury. All Hodgson was trying to do was rest him because he's just come back from injury, and he's put on the theatrics, been quite childish to be honest, and yeah, totally put on in my opinion. Moving on to Brighton versus Wolves, a brilliant reaction from Brighton after the FA Cup exit and the loss to Nottingham Forest previously. Wolves were absolutely clueless. They had made lots of mistakes that Brighton punished, and you'd think after 2 or 3 goals they'd be like, right, let's buck our ideas up. It's damage limitation at this point because Brighton will punish us. But no, they didn't learn from it at all. Undav, Gross and Welbeck all got braces. The 6-0 win's brilliant, and it's even more brilliant when you see that Colwill, McAllister, Matoma and Caicedo were all being rested. That's 4 key players that we didn't have starting, and we still demolished Wolves. Their only real chance was the Núñez shot, which still did well to stop. They never really caused a threat apart from that. Standout performers in the midfield were Billy Gilmour and Julio Enciso. Enciso's really impressed me this season, obviously only 19 years old. He's always free, he always wants the ball. You see sometimes young players shying away, but he wants it, he's relentless, he always wants that ball, which, you know, he's really talented and he shows that. He escapes his man really well, which I think is quite impressive, shows maturity for a young midfielder. Obviously picked up 2 assists, created lots of chances, and Wolves had no idea what to do with him. Billy Gilmour took his chance as well in the first team with a man of the match performance. We've seen it at Chelsea, he's a great passer of the ball, he's very good at progressing the ball forwards. He also does the dirty work, he does the bits that most players shy away from doing in football. It's not the pretty football, it's the rubbish bits that no one really wants to do. He said that De Zerbi told him to be patient. Obviously he hadn't played for a while, but he said that he was prepared and ready and knew what he had to do. And I think he summed it up perfectly in that interview because he was ready, he was prepared, and I think he played really well. Brighton are now looking at European football. Obviously it has been on the cards for quite a while now, but it's looking more and more likely. We've got United coming up, then Everton, Arsenal, Newcastle, Southampton, City and Aston Villa. That is so many games that we've got until the end of the month. Obviously so many games that have been postponed, moved about, that are now coming in this long run-in. United are beatable. I think I said before the FA Cup semi-final, whatever happens in the semi-final, the opposite will happen in the league game, because if we beat United, we'll then be complacent and not bother about that because we would have got to an FA Cup final. If we lose, we will now try even harder to beat them in the league, so I think that's a winnable game. Everton at home, same sort of thing, I think we could win that. Arsenal away is a tricky fixture, as is Newcastle away. Southampton at home, I think it's doable. City at home, probably not going to happen. Villa away is a massive fixture because that could decide where we come in whether we come in a European place, and if we do, who gets what spot, because obviously Aston Villa and Brighton are fighting for those spots at the minute. As for Wolves, they've only got 4 games remaining and they've got a really tricky run in. It's not looking very good for them at the minute. They've got Villa coming up, then United, then Everton and Arsenal. The only winnable game in my opinion is Everton, but they're going to be fighting for their lives. That game's going to mean so much more to them than it does Wolves, so they're going to have to try really hard to pick up any points until the end of the season. Next game is Brentford versus Nottingham Forest. Key game for both teams, but Brentford got the win. Forest did take the lead. Danilo's goal, it was good, but it wasn't the best defending from Brentford. Danilo was in the right place at the right time. Obviously, Ivan Toney's free kick got the equaliser. Really intelligent. Keylor Navas will be disappointed. A goalkeeper of that calibre is always going to be frustrated to get beat at the near post. He was scrambling but just couldn't get a strong enough hand. He potentially seen it late, but as a Champions League and La Liga winner, you'd be furious that you've been caught out like that. Beaten at the near post for the winner as well, so not a good day for him at all. It's a massive win for Brentford, who are still chasing European football. I think they can do something special in the next 4 games. Forest are in danger. I think it's looking like they are going to go down. They've got Chelsea and Southampton coming up, which are massive games. I can see them getting 4 to 6 points from that. Chelsea, potentially one of the easiest games in Premier League football at the minute because they are poor, but we'll get on to that later. And obviously Southampton, I think they could get a win against them as well. So they could get maybe 4 points from the next few games, but it's going to be tricky. Brentford are in 9th, and their next 4 games are Liverpool, West Ham, Spurs and City. Can't see them getting much from that. Maybe a win against West Ham, potentially against Spurs, but City and Liverpool I can't see them beating. Man United versus Aston Villa was one of the more lower scoring games of this weekend. Not as exciting, but a very strong win from United's point of view. Villa have been in form, so it's very good from Man United in my opinion. And it was a game that ended Villa's unbeaten streak. United were the better side in my opinion. Casemiro I thought played really well. He returned to the side, resuming business as usual. He obviously had the key header that sent Rashford through on goal. It was Bruno Fernandes that got the goal, obviously reaching the ball first from Rashford's shot that rebounded out. In my opinion, I think Martinez could have done better. The shot from Rashford looked quite slow on TV. Obviously we're not there, we're not at Martinez's perspective, but I do think he could have done a bit better. He has pushed it straight into the path of Bruno Fernandes, which obviously made them concede the goal that did end up being the winner. I was also quite impressed by Diogo Dalot. He was strong going forward and defensively. I've been impressed by him all season, to be honest. He's stepped up massively, obviously taking that spot in right back off Wan-Bissaka. He's made himself first choice right back, and yeah, he's doing both bits, which is quite good. Obviously sometimes, like for example, Trent gets stick for being good for going forward and not being good defensively. Diogo Dalot, I think he's strong doing both parts of the game, so I think he was a standout man in that game that maybe went unnoticed, especially considering all the injury problems for United at the back at the minute. I think he's stepped up quite well. Bournemouth versus Leeds then. Bournemouth ran absolute riot over Leeds. They're having a nightmare. Obviously, we now know that Leeds have sacked their manager and brought in Sam Allardyce. But as for Bournemouth, a brilliant brace by Lerma. 2 strong finishes. I think one person that needs to become a bit more noticed because of what he's done is Gary O'Neill. He came in after that 9-0 defeat under Scott Parker, and he's totally changed Bournemouth as a team. He's done a brilliant job. I can see them now staying up. Leeds, on the other hand, are in awful form. As I said, Sam Allardyce is now coming in. I think one player that needs to just get out of the squad for the rest of the season, and not in a disrespectful way, in a way that could potentially help his career, is Meslier, the Leeds goalkeeper. His confidence is on the floor. He's a young goalkeeper. He's conceding too many goals week in, week out. As a young goalkeeper, you don't want to be playing in a squad that's in a relegation battle. You're conceding 3, 4, 5 goals every single week. How is that going to help you in the future? You're not having to make saves. Your defence in front of you isn't good. And the confidence that you let out puts it out onto your back 4. And if you've got a young goalkeeper in goal who isn't confident in himself, that impacts the back 4 because they're not confident that, oh, if we don't tackle, then Meslier's not going to save it. So then they're jittery. It goes through the whole team from that goalkeeper. And I think if they take him out now, give him time to just relax, come back in pre-season, work on your confidence, speak to the psychologist, you can work on it and then come back better. At the minute, all that playing those remaining 4 games is going to do is make it worse. Bournemouth are currently on 39 points. I think they'll be at 43 by the end of the season. They've got Chelsea, Palace, United, Everton left. I think they can get a point against Chelsea. I think anyone can get a result against Chelsea at the minute. Palace will be tricky, United will be tricky, but Everton, I think that'll be a big game at the end of the season that they could get something from. As for Leeds, they've got City, Newcastle, West Ham, Spurs. They couldn't have a more difficult run if they tried. Is Allardyce going to keep them up? Probably not. He's bought in 99% of the time to prevent relegations, but I think it's too little too late. I don't know why they didn't bring someone with that sort of experience in sooner. Up the other end of the table is a team that are doing fantastically and got another 3 points, is Man City. They faced Fulham and beat them 2-1. They went top of the table for the first time since February, and it looks like the league title is now in their hands. The Julian Alvarez goal was a joke of a finish, and I think when we watched that City side, you saw it against Arsenal as well. The massive gulf in class between City and the rest of the league is unbelievable. Arsenal was supposed to show them, yep, this is us, we're fighting. You're not going to be the only team that just runs right in the league and wins it every single year. And they got smashed. And this week, another confident win, 2-1. Probably looks more shaky on paper, but it's City, they're always comfortable. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did the treble. Their squad depth is a key part of this. You have a top 4 side just with their bench alone, let alone their starting 11, which is a key reason to their success. I think the only reason that would stop them winning the treble is if Real Madrid beat them at the Bernabeu. So that leg at home at the Etihad, they need to win big, because Real Madrid at the Bernabeu is a tough fixture, and that is the only thing, in my opinion, that will stop them winning the treble. Apart from that, it's totally in their hands. Another key point is obviously Haaland hit his 50th goal of the season. Many people said that, in the Premier League he won't be able to do it. He has silenced all of them. He's also got his 34th Premier League goal of the season, beating Alan Shearer and Andy Cole for the record amount of goals scored in a single Premier League season. That's a brilliant record in itself, but when you realise that Shearer and Cole did it in a 42-game season and Haaland's still got 6 games remaining of a 38-game season, it makes it even more ridiculous. Haaland also set another record that game. He is the first top-flight player to score 50 goals in a single season since 1931. Tom Waring set the record 90 years ago for Villa, and the Norwegian is the first person since then to score that many goals. He's a once-in-a-generation sort of player. He's definitely that person that's going to be the Messi, Ronaldo replacement. He will be the pinnacle of football for the next 15 years. The Premier League is supposed to be the most difficult league in the world, and he has smashed it first season. You watch him in disbelief, but also there's now this expectation where if he doesn't score, you're like, oh. But he never seems to let you down. Moving on to what I think is probably the best game of the weekend. Even though Brighton won 6-0, I do think this tops it. Liverpool versus Spurs, 4-3. Spurs went 3-0 down inside 15 minutes. 2 weeks after going 5-0 down in 20 versus Newcastle, Spurs were abysmal. They've got no identity. They did well to come back, but it's ridiculous that they continue to get in these situations week in, week out. If you go 5-0 down 2 weeks ago, you have got to have learnt your lesson. But then they go and do the same thing against Liverpool, 3-0 down in 15 minutes. Liverpool played great football. Spurs didn't know what to do. The comeback was good. Richarlison obviously finally gets his first goal of the season, but the celebrations were a bit excessive considering Diogo Jota scored 90 seconds later. I get it, you've come back, you've scored your first goal. £60 million signing, a lot of pressure, but he's taken his shirt off every single time he scored his first goal for the club, and they've all been disallowed. This is the first one that wasn't disallowed, and I don't think he even had his shirt back on by the time Jota had put it in his own net. So, it wasn't his fault. I get it, he's a passionate player, but looks so silly now. But what on earth was Lucas Moura thinking? Awful. As a Premier League player, you can't be doing that. Surely, you've got to have a bit of intelligence to think, I'm not going to play a silly pass like that. Just keep it calm, tight at the back. It was shocking. Liverpool deserved the win, but they did drop off massively after scoring them 3 goals. Got complacent, were almost punished for it, but just got away with it. But it wasn't thanks to them. I think it was thanks to Lucas Moura, who will be kicking himself because I don't quite know what was going through his head at that moment in time. Big talking point was the red card situation. Obviously, Jota probably should have been carded. It was an awful challenge. He was going for the ball, but having your boot that high up, it's got to be sent off. Skip had to have stitches. It's so controversial because Jota was the one that went on to score the winner. Ryan Mason, obviously, very unhappy. He said it was ridiculous. Top 4 could potentially now be on the cards for Liverpool, though. Their next 4 games are Brentford, Leicester, Villa, Southampton. All winnable. Villa will be tricky. Brentford will be tricky. But I'm not sure I don't think they're going to get top 4. But a lot of Liverpool fans are obviously hopeful that potentially Newcastle or United will drop points here and there so that they can swoop in. It would be quite impressive considering where they were a few months ago, but still not a best season considering the levels they could be at with the players they've got and their previous. As for Spurs, they've got Palace, Villa, Brentford and Leeds. I'm not sure how they're going to do, to be honest with you. Palace are a good side at the minute. Villa, same. Brentford, the same. And Leeds, obviously, as we spoke about, they will need 3 points. Ellen Road will be rocking. On paper, they should win all of those games except maybe Villa. But you never know with Spurs. On to the Monday evening game, which was Leicester versus Everton. Bottom of the table clash. A bittersweet ending for both sides. Big talking point, obviously, being the Pickford penalty save. Really, really clever. I mean, you see a lot of goalkeepers doing it now anyway, with written on water bottles or in towels, pieces of paper, telling you which ways keepers are going to go. Obviously, all the analysts do all the work, and then the keepers just have to do as they're told from the stats that they get given. But, I mean, and it's worked out well for Pickford. Obviously, there was a 60% chance, something like that, written on his thing, that Maddison would go down the middle. So he stuck with his guns, confident in the analysis, and it worked out. Everton are still in the relegation zone, and Leicester are just above the drop. I think it's a missed opportunity for both sides. Maddison will be gutted that he went down the middle and Pickford stayed still, but it is what it is. I think Pickford salvaged the point for them. Leicester's next 4 games, it's not looking good. They've got a difficult run with Fulham, Liverpool, Newcastle, West Ham. If they went down, it would be a huge shock. I'm not sure if they will, but you never want to believe that a team that will win in the league 7 odd years ago are then going to go down. Everton's next 4 games, once again, difficult run-in. Brighton, City, I don't think they'll get anything from that. They've got Wolves, which they could win. Wolves are in very poor form. Bournemouth playing well, not sure, would be lucky to get a point. I think Everton could potentially be the biggest team to ever go down, and I do think it's going to happen. They're 5-time FA Cup winners, 9-time league winners, but I just can't see them staying up. They've got such a difficult run. I just can't see it happening. Final game of the week was Arsenal versus Chelsea. Another nightmare for Chelsea. They can't seem to get a win. I'm not quite sure what Todd Bowley was thinking bringing in Lampard. I mean, you can't just bring in a manager because he's a club legend. I get it's only interim and it's a write-off season anyway, but they just can't get anything. The 10 points that Thomas Tuchel got at the start of the season and then got sacked are keeping them in the league. They would be fighting for their lives if it wasn't for the points he'd won them. Lampard's now lost 10 matches in a row in all competitions. He's the first English manager in 35 years to do this, which isn't a record you want to have against your name as a young manager. They were 3-0 down inside 30 minutes. It was absolute shambles. It was like Sunday League defending, especially for Gabriel Jesus' goal. That should have been cleared instantly. Arsenal were lucky that it was all like pinball in the box. It fell to Jesus. Chelsea just didn't even seem bothered to get the ball away. It was schoolboy stuff. They don't look bothered. The season's obviously a write-off, but the players just don't look like they care. Madueke, in my opinion, was the best player on the pitch for Chelsea. He got the goal. I'm not sure if Chelsea are going to get many more this season, so that's going to be potentially their goal of the month. But yeah, Chelsea are just so poor. As I said earlier, I think Chelsea at home is probably the easiest fixture in the Premier League at the minute. They are just, there's no intensity, there's nothing, similar to Spurs, the identity is just non-existent. Their remaining fixtures are Bournemouth, who need points, Forest, who need points, teams that care more about getting points on the board, because Chelsea don't seem bothered about progressing. City need it, United need it, Newcastle need it. I can't see them getting anything. And you'd never thought you'd say that about them playing against Bournemouth and Forest, and even Newcastle at the start of the season, but you can't see Chelsea getting anything anywhere. Arsenal obviously not giving in. I'm not quite sure they're going to be able to do it now. I think it's too late. Those 3 games that they really should have won, they didn't. Got demolished by City, showing the golfing class as we spoke about. They've got Newcastle and Brighton coming up, which are going to be 2 very difficult games. And then Forest and Wolves, which I think they win. They're going to have to really, really fight if they want to win the league. And I think even if they get 12 out of 12 points, it's still going to be very tight. And I don't think it's going to be enough. Which is unfortunate because they've done really well. And if you told an Arsenal fan at the start of the season, yeah, we're going to come second, they'd be elated. They'd be so, so happy that they've even qualified for the top 4. They'd take 4th at the start of the season. But it's just the way in which they've lost the title. In my opinion, it's gone. And unfortunately, Arsenal don't have that experience like City do, which has potentially cost them. So that is all the fixtures summed up. We're going to go through my team of the week. Goalkeeper, it was a difficult one because the only 2 goalkeepers to keep a clean sheet this weekend were De Gea and Steele. And I think they only had, one keeper had 1 save to make the whole game and the other had 2 saves to make. So it's not really fair to give it to them based on clean sheets because they literally had nothing to do. No goalkeepers really stood out as a lot of goals were scored and therefore conceded on the keeper's part. However, I'm going to give it to Pickford because he saved the penalty that salvaged a point for his side. And at the minute for Everton, a point could prove to be vital come the end of the season. Pickford's the best of a bad bunch this week as the goalkeeping was dreadful in my opinion. Really not great, but yeah, I'll give it to Pickford in goal. Defenders, I've got John Stones, Pervis Estupiñán and Diogo Dalot. Estupiñán, I think he always goes unnoticed in an overperforming Brighton team. When we lost Cucurella, I think everyone was a bit worried about the replacement, but he is put in a shift every single game. And I think that's all you need at left back in that Brighton side. Put in a shift, get forward, which he does really well. He creates lots of chances, gets back to do the dirty work. He fits in De Zerbi's system perfectly. He got an assist to show for it as well. He's had a lot of performances where he does so well, but he goes unnoticed because he's not in that starlight position. He showed his talents again. He's been really good. So he's gone in my team of the week. Stones, because I think he's been in great form at the minute. He played really well, again, similar to recent weeks. He's been very good at the back, but he's also doing really well in that role where he starts creating attacks and helps out in the midfield. His passing's been a huge part of his game this season. Expanded his horizons, I think, in that aspect. He's been more versatile, which is obviously why Pep's picking him in a very competitive side. And also, England, he's excelling. Final defensive spot is Diogo Dalot. Once again, I think goes unnoticed, but steps up to the plate really well. Taking that first choice right back spot as we spoke about. He's been solid pretty much all season for United, and he's had another good display against Villa, who have a massive attacking threat. The whole United line kept them at bay, but I think when you're playing a team like that, I expected Villa to nick something from the game, but Dalot and the rest of that back line kept them at bay. But I have been impressed by Dalot all season, which is why he's gone in. Midfielders, I've got Ødegaard, Lerma, Eze and Enciso. I picked Ødegaard because he led his side so well. After recent results, it's been really disappointing. As captain, you've got to lead by example, which he does in most games. He obviously got the brace against Chelsea, and he's just got so much quality on the ball. I think anyone would be silly not to put him in there after his performance this week. Jeffrey Lerma, he took both his goals really well. A strong performance overall, not just because he got the brace, but actually in that Bournemouth side who have got a lot of pressure on them, he handles it well personally. All the players are handling it well, but overall his performance was very impressive, and obviously getting the 2 goals to top it off is why he's ended up in my squad. Eze has been great for Palace all season. He's so calm on the ball. Another player that doesn't let pressure affect him. And I think one thing that I see a lot, obviously he gets the goals, but also his passing is really good. He passes with purpose. He creates the most chances in that game. He's got a really high success rate of passing. When he passes the ball, his passes mean something. It's not just, I'm under pressure, let's just pass it and hope for the best. When he passes it, there's purpose. It creates something 99% of the time, and his passes aren't just kicking it because he's afraid. It's playing it into someone who's then going to start an attack. So I think he's quite an exciting talent as well for England. But yeah, he played really well against West Ham. Enciso is the final midfielder I've put in because of, obviously I said earlier, he's always free, he escapes his man well, and he plays with great maturity for a 19-year-old, which I think you don't see much. Obviously Jude Bellingham is the pinnacle of that. In a Brighton squad where there's so much competition, a 19-year-old boy is coming in and doing it at a high level. Even though he's got that maturity, he also doesn't lack the childish energy where you chase the ball. He's a relentless player, and Brighton are really lucky to have found him. He got 2 assists to his name. He's having a brilliant breakout season, similar to quite a few others at the Albion this year, Evan Ferguson to name another one. The club's been really well run after many years of struggle, and I think players like Enciso are showing that perfectly. Final 3 players in attack are Callum Wilson, Welbeck and Julian Alvarez. Wilson, because I think how can you not go in a team of the week if you're getting a brace in one half as a substitute? That can't go unnoticed. He's always been Prem proven, always reliable, as he was versus Southampton. He was unlucky not to get a hat-trick, to be fair. He obviously hit the woodwork, had a goal ruled offside. He's just a really classy striker. Welbeck, he's stepped up really well after Ferguson's injury. Brace versus Wolves, 2 very different goals. Once again, someone that shows their class, another Prem proven striker. Yes, there's a lot of Brighton players in my team. However, when a team wins 6-0, there's going to have a lot of standout stars. Even if it was, as a Brighton fan, even if it was Crystal Palace that won 6-0, you'd have to put 2 or 3 players in there because you would have those sort of players standing out. Final player is Julian Alvarez, because although the limelight is always on Erling Haaland, Alvarez is a really good striker. We saw it at the World Cup. Potentially when he joined, it was sort of brushed over because when you bring in another striker of Haaland's calibre, you don't really remember the young Argentine striker that you brought in because you've got one of the best players in the world. He is often forgotten about, but he always produces, and what a goal it was. In pretty much any other Premier League side he could start because he creates good runs, he gets the goals. He is a very good striker for his age, but unfortunately he's not going to be showcased as much because they've got Erling Haaland. But this week he was really impressive and he is making it into my team of the week. That is where I'm going to end the podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back soon with another one.